Hi, this is Sarit Switzer, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast, a podcast devoted to the teachings of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi as recorded in his most famous work, the Tanya. My hope for this show is to make these teachings accessible and relatable to the average person, regardless of prior Jewish education or affiliation. The episodes follow the prescribed daily study portions and are meant to serve as practical lessons in how to live your life as your true self and develop an authentic and powerful relationship with your Creator. I have personally experienced the effects the study of this work has had on me, and I'm excited to share what I can of this knowledge with you. So please join me on this journey of learning, self-growth, and connection with your source. Hi, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast. This is episode 533 for the 18th of Iyar in a regular year. So today is Lag BaOmer. Happy Lag BaOmer, everybody. And I think it's pretty apt that today is Lag BaOmer, given the topic that we're going to be discussing in today's episode. Because for those of you who are not so familiar with it, what is Lag BaOmer? Well, so we are currently in a period of time in the Jewish calendar known as Sfiras HaOmer, the 49 days of the counting of the Omer. And this tradition actually dates back to the days of the temple of the Beis HaMikdash, when beginning with the second day of Passover, we would bring an omer of barley. An omer was a certain quantity, a certain measurement of barley to the temple as a sacrifice, and this was done for 49 days. Culminating with the holiday of Shavuos, which is the celebration of our receiving of the Torah on Mount Sinai. And so, spiritually speaking, this period of time of Sfiras HaOmer is considered to be like a time for spiritual preparation for receiving the Torah, because we believe that we receive the Torah anew every single year. And the reason for 49 days is because 49 is 7 times 7, and there are 7 emotive attributes, as you know by now from listening to the Tanya podcast. And each one of those 7 emotive attributes has all of the other 7 within them. So this is considered to be a time of refinement of our emotions, refinement of our character traits in preparation for the receiving of the Torah. So it's 7 times 7 to, really point to really hit at all of the emotive character traits, and that equals 49 days. But another aspect of this counting of the Omer is that this time actually commemorates a time when there was a plague of Rabbi Akiva's 24,000 disciples. And so this is why it's considered to be somewhat of a period of mourning. We don't listen to live music during this time or have big celebrations or whatever. However, what happened was that this plague that was killing so many of Rabbi Akiva's students actually came to an end on the 33rd of Omer, of the Omer, Lag BaOmer, which is why it's considered to be a really big day of celebration. We actually do listen to live music, and celebrations do happen. Many people get married on Lag BaOmer. There are upshernishes that happen, so it's it's commemorating the first haircut of a Jewish boy at the age of 3. And so really a lot of this, mourning period is considered to be to kind of end on this date of Lag BaOmer. So as mentioned, a big part of this, the commemoration of the ending of the mourning period, is this listening to music on this day of Lag BaOmer. And music is going to be a big topic of our episode today. So let's talk about music. So there is a quote attributed to Mozart, which says, "The music is not in the notes, but in the silence between." So what does that mean exactly? And this is going to be the topic of today's episode, is we're really going to explore and get deeper into this idea of the silence between the notes. So if you think about that, when you are listening to a song, it might sound like what makes the song really melodic and sound good to your ears and make it into a beautiful song is the notes and the volume and the chord progression and all of that stuff. But imagine if you were to have all of those notes, all of those chord progressions playing at the exact same time. That would just sound like noise, right? What actually makes it into a very beautiful song is actually the silence between the notes. This is a very, very profound idea, and it applies not only to music, it actually applies to anything creative, really anything. So if you think about art, we can say the same thing about visual art as well. Like a painting, we can say that art is the spaces between the lines. So again, if you think about a painting, if you think about a very beautiful drawing of some kind, so you might think that what makes the drawing really beautiful is the lines, the curvature, the colors, things like that. But if you really think about it, what makes the painting really beautiful and what makes the painting work and what makes it pleasing to your eye and what makes it give us a sense of like meaning to the painting is the spaces between the lines. So this is a really big concept. This is something that's explored actually in art school often, is this idea of the spaces, working with the spaces. And this is a big topic in Chassidus as well, as we'll see. And this is exactly the topic that we're going to be focusing on today. So today's episode, we're going to be beginning a new chapter in Likkutei Amarim, and this is chapter 49. And the focus of this chapter is on this idea of space, and is on this idea of how the grand artist, the grand musician of the entire universe, which is, of course, God, also utilizes space. And also, when we think about God's creation, we tend to think about all the things that he puts out into the world and all the things that he creates in the world. But really, more important than all of those lines, all of those notes, so to speak, is actually the space. It's actually what we don't see. And what we don't see is what gives rise to what we do see. And in Hebrew and Kabbalistic terminology, this is what's known as tzimtzum, as the contraction. The concept of tzimtzum is something that is really spoken about a lot in a lot of depth in Chassidus. And there are so many different layers. Like, you would think, how many layers can you talk about space? Like, space is what is not, but it's actually a huge topic. And there are different types of tzimtzumim. There's some tzimtzumim that are greater than others, some that are more intense than others. And today we're going to explore some basic tzimtzumim, namely three basic tzimtzumim. We're going to explore what they are and how these three tzimtzumim, these three categories of tzimtzumim are so essential to the creation of our world, to the existence of our universe. And we're also going to explore how this relates to our practical service of God. Because again, Tanya is a very practical book, and the focus of Tanya is not meant to just be a philosophical treatise and to help us understand God just in a theoretical way, or the universe in a theoretical way, but it's actually meant to be very practical. And the end conclusion of what, just to skip ahead a little bit, of where the Alter Rebbe is going to take us on this journey of really understanding the space and how God uses space to create the universe, is that the lesson that we can learn from this, and the lesson that we really should take away from it, is that really ultimately God, in order to bring about this world, in order to bring about us, God restrains himself a lot, like really a lot. Like, he really removes himself and holds himself back, so to speak, a lot in order to make this reality real. And this is all for our sake. And it's really amazing when we'll see this and we'll learn about it, is that there's so many universes, so many realms, but yet all of this contraction, all of this concealment is really just for us. We are that final painting. We are that final song. And so in reciprocation, as we've been learning, like begets like. When mirror, you look in the water and what you see is the reflection of what is being put into that water. If somebody does a good deed to you, then you feel compelled to do a good deed back to them. This is something which Robert Cialdini talks about this in his book Influence, in terms of marketing, how a really good marketing ploy, lahavdil, is to actually give things to your customers. When the more you give to your customers, the more they will want to give back to you. And so when we really recognize what it is that God is giving to us and how much God is withholding himself and restraining himself and holding himself back, this should ultimately lead to us learning how to restrain ourselves and learning how to hold ourselves back, and thinking about what is it that we can withhold from ourselves? How much of ourselves can we constrict for the sake of God? So let's get straight into the text and see how the Alter Rebbe explains all of this and take it from there. And hopefully we'll understand these concepts a little bit deeper. So the Alter Rebbe begins, and he begins by saying that this whole idea of this, so we've been talking about this idea of Tzimtzum, this idea of Hashem concealing himself from the world in order to create the world. So the Alter Rebbe begins, and he says that all these aspects of the concealment and the hiding of the infinite God in the Hishtalshus, we call it, like the chain of descent of all the worlds, until we come to this physical world, it's actually, they're too numerous to count. Like if we were really to get into like all the levels of concealment that God goes through in order to create this world, we wouldn't be able to count them. They're too vast. There's too many. And the Alter Rebbe says, as is known to those people that know about, that have tasted from the tree of life, it's called the Etz HaChaim. What is the Etz HaChaim? The Etz HaChaim is an allusion to Kabbalah. So the Alter Rebbe basically saying is those people who have studied a little bit of Kabbalah are aware of the fact that the levels of contraction that God goes through in order to create this world are really too numerous to count. There's just too many of them. However, in a general sense, there are three basic levels of intent, three basic types of Tzimtzumim, three basic types of contractions, of intense contractions in a general sense. And then within these three categories of contractions, then yes, there are myriads and myriads of details. And so, but what we're really going to focus on today is what are these three categories? And so just to recap here, so the Alter Rebbe gives us a little review, which we had mentioned this previously in the Tanya, if you've been following along. The three general categories, the three general realms, the three general worlds are the worlds of Bria and Yetzirah and Asiya, which are loosely translated as Bria is the world of creation, Yetzirah is the world of formation, and Asiya is the world of action, it's called. And then you might be saying to yourself, wait, I seem to remember that there was a fourth world. There's the world of Atzilus. So yes, there's also a fourth world of Atzilus. However, Atzilus is a strange kind of world because Atzilus is total godliness. And so it's like kind of separate than the other worlds. It's always kind of put in its own category because, just to recap what each one of these worlds are, is I like to really think about it through the parable of giving birth, because I think that's really the best way to really understand these four realms. Because if you think about it, creation is really an aspect of God giving birth. So the realm of Atzilus, which again is a world but not really a world, is when you have the potential of a baby to be born within the mother and the father. So they haven't even united yet. They have not even conceived a child at all. There's just a potential there. So yes, the child exists in a potential form within the mother and also within the father, but there's no baby. There's no conception at all. There's no, right now we're living in a time of heated debates about abortion and stuff like that. This is like beyond that debate even, because they haven't even conceived anything. There's nothing, but there is a something. There's a possibility for a child, but that child is totally and 100% united with the parents. There's no separation between the child and the parents. Then the world of Bria is the conception of the child. This is where, yes, now we can say the woman is pregnant. She may not have any visible signs of being pregnant. There's no like development of the baby yet, but she has now conceived a child. She is in that level of conception. That's the level of Bria. The level of Yetzirah is a very much more elaborate world in that sense, is that it's the world of development. It's the world of formation. It's not just creation, which is Bria. Bria is that initial creation of the child. Now we're in the world of formation. So this is where the baby really develops within the uterus of the child, and it's going through all the stages of development in that womb. And then finally we have the world of Asiya, which is where that's the world of action, and this is where the baby is actually born, and it takes on a totally separate entity and is actually now has a separate existence than the mother. So this is the world that we live in, and this is why it is that in our world we don't sense God, we don't see God in a physical way, because just like a child doesn't, even though it may like theoretically know that it came from its mother, it doesn't see that. It's not attached at the umbilical cord anymore. It's not inside of the mother's womb. So of course, this is where the analogy breaks down a little bit, because we know that even though for us, it may seem like we're separate from God, we're not actually separate from God, even though the child is actually separate from its mother. So that's a brief recap of the 4 worlds. So now, just to get back to our discussion here about the contractions and the three general contractions. So we're going to see how these 3 general contractions correspond to these 3 worlds of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya. And so we're going to start actually with Atzilus, because in Atzilus we say that, again, that is where it's total godliness, just like for the parents. That's where the child exists in potential only in the parents, and it's not separate from the parents at all. So how do we get from that level of Atzilus to the level of Bria? How do we get from the parents having the potential to have a child and then them actually conceiving a child? So we say, oh, okay, it's like they get together and they are intimate, and then now there's a conception of a child. So that's explaining the like what happens, but it's really a really crazy miracle if you think about it. It's actually like, how does that happen? There's no child and now there's a child. It's like there's a potential for a child and now they actually have conceived a child. So in that level, that realm of the conception of the child, which is that realm of Bria for God, what is in this, what constitutes this realm? So we know that what constitutes this realm of Bria are the souls and supernal angels, that their service of God is in an aspect of intellect that is vested within them, that they understand and they receive an influence from this level of Chabad, from this level of intellect, which is a very, very great contraction, as we talked about above. So basically, so just to break that down again, so as we discussed elsewhere, it within godliness, within these spiritual realms, the realm of Bria, the realm of conception, is this intellectual realm. It's this realm which is ruled by the intellect. So it's a realm in which you have angels and you have souls, and what they do all day long is they think and contemplate about God, and they try to understand godliness as much as possible. It's a very theoretical realm. So, but it is a realm, so again, going back to the analogy of a baby, it's the conception of the child, but there's no actual formation of the child. The fetus hasn't developed yet. It's just like now the woman is pregnant. So now it's like, what that pregnancy is going to look like, how it's going to develop, what are its various components going to be. It's there in a DNA format, but it's totally theoretical still at this point. It's not actually developed. So this is why it's the realm of the intellect. However, in order to even get to that level, of the conception of the child from Atzilus to Bria, there needs to be a very, very, very powerful contraction. Because again, think about that. It's crazy if you think about it, that you have parents and then you have the conception of a child. How does that happen? It's a crazy contraction that has to happen. There needs to be this like really big removal of the parents in order for this other thing to happen. In order to have something exist that is not you, but is created by you, there needs to be a very big concealment of you, basically. And so this is what happens with God. And so this is the first contraction. Then we have the next contraction. The next contraction is from the realm of Bria to Yetzirah. So this is from the realm of conception or creation, we call it, to the realm of formation. Because when we think about the small amount of light that gets clothed within the realm of Bria. So just to explain that again a little bit more, is that what do we mean by this big contraction that happens from the world of Atzilus to Bria? So if you have 2 parents, going back to that analogy of the parents, and they both have the potential to conceive a child. However, they don't only have the potential to conceive one child, they have the potential to conceive, in theory, an infinite number of children. Like, we don't know which child is going to result from their union. We don't know what that child's DNA going to be. There's literally an infinite number of possibilities. So to take those infinite number of possibilities and to narrow it down into one DNA of one child, of one, like, now they have conceived. This is huge. This is a very, very big contraction. So they're contracting all of these infinite possibilities of conception into one conception, which is what happens when God contracts himself from the realm of Atzilus into the realm of Bria. Atzilus is the realm of infinite possibilities, and then Bria is one possibility. Now he has created one world. However, even though that's a huge jump where it's like now we've gone from one possibility, from infinite possibilities into one possibility, when we want to do that next jump of Bria to Yetzirah, even though the level of Bria sounds like it's a very minute level of light because it was such a huge contraction from the level of Atzilus, in comparison to the realm of a Yetzirah, the realm of formation, that realm of Bria is considered like infinity in the realm of Yetzirah. So this is where it becomes very relative. So again, let's go back to the analogy of conception and pregnancy. Is that okay? The woman is pregnant. She took a pregnancy test. The parents were intimate and she conceived a child. She is now in this realm of conception. But then to go from conception into the formation of the child, that's a huge jump, because when she conceives that child, what that formation of the child will be is as of yet really unknown. Yes, it has a DNA. That's true. But how that DNA will manifest is not a clear-cut thing. We really don't know. It's, you can have twins who have the same genetic components to them, but the way that they actually develop in life is going to come out very, very differently. There's a lot of unknown. The possibilities are really infinite. So this reminds me of that discussion that we had about quantum mechanics. If you go back quite a while ago, where we had a whole discussion about quantum mechanics and perception and all of that, and how let's say we talk Schrodinger's cat, and how when the cat is in the box, we don't have to get all into it here, but the cat is in the box and we don't know, is the cat dead or alive? And we don't know until we open that box. So while the cat is still in that box, it's in potential, it's both. So while we're in the realm of Bria, while we're in the realm of conception, what the formation of the child is going to look like is still in the realm of the unknown. It's still in the realm of theoretical. So to get from that level of Bria to get to the level of Yetzirah is a huge jump. And the only way that we can get there is through the only way that that world of Bria can be vested within the realm of Yetzirah is through a very, very great Tzimtzum once again. So we had one Tzimtzum. So Tzimtzum number one was from the world of Atzilus to the world of Bria in order for there to be a conception at all. And then to get from the world of Bria to the world of Yetzirah is our second contraction, our second Tzimtzum, which is another huge one. And then now we have our third one to get from the realm of Yetzirah to Asiya. That's another one. So again, going back to the analogy of a child and the conception and development and subsequent birth of the child, to go from that developmental level of the child developing within the mother's uterus to actually now the actual child is born is a huge thing, because it's like up until then, the child has actually, even though it's developing within its mother and it's developing all these traits and everything, it doesn't actually become a separate entity until it actually emerges from the mother. And at that point, that's a huge contraction. And interestingly enough, if you think about it, we actually use the word contractions in order to talk about that level of that way of a mother. When a mother's pregnant and about to give birth to a child, she experiences a lot of contractions, right? So I think that's interesting that we use that same term to describe physical birth, which really does parallel spiritual birth, which is the spiritual aspect of bringing the world into existence. And then the Alter Rebbe writes here in brackets, he says that these three aspects of contractions, like we're talking about them in a very general sense here, but they are elaborated upon a lot more at length in order to make it more accessible to our lowly intellect. So it's the basic idea here is that even if I'm trying as much as I can to try to explain these three contractions, if they still seem kind of obscure to you, that is normal, because they are really big topics and there's a lot more to explore in each one of these. But the Alter Rebbe just wants to give us a general sense of each one of these contractions in the session today. that we're learning. And so now the Alter Rebbe goes on and he says, this is like the clincher, is he says that the purpose of all of these contractions is actually for the sole purpose of the creation of the body of man, which is material, and for that man to subdue the sitra achar, to subdue the negative aspects, that other side that we talked about earlier in the Tanya, so that there will be more light over darkness. By having man elevate his animal soul and also his vital soul and all of its garments and all of the powers of the body, all just for God, as we explained above at length. So again, in the earlier parts of Tanya, like earlier on in this podcast, please go back and listen if you need a review or if you haven't already. We talked a lot about how like the whole purpose of man is really to elevate their animal soul, elevate their godly soul, elevate all of the garments, like really to do this self-transformation. And this is the ultimate purpose, the Alter Rebbe is saying, to really, of everything, of all these contractions, is really in order, this whole Hishtalshelus of all of the worlds is for this purpose of man, for this. So same way that, going back to the analogy of a child, that the whole point, why is the woman conceiving a child? Why is the fetus developing within the mother? It's not just like for her to be in a state of pregnancy, like being pregnant is like a state of being in its own right? But it's not just for the sake of being pregnancy. Obviously, it's obvious to us. The whole point is the child. The whole point is for that baby to be born and have a life of its own, and hopefully to develop into a good and upstanding, upright citizen. So too with us, the whole point of all of God's contractions, the contraction from Atzilus to Bria, the contraction from Bria to Yetzirah, and the final contraction of Bria to Asiya, is for us, is in order to create this body, our physical bodies and our lives, in order for, and then the point is for us to elevate ourselves, to subdue the Sitra Achra here, and to be the best versions of ourselves that we can be. And so just to go back to the intro where I spoke about art before we move forward, is similarly, it's like when a person is composing a piece of music, or a person is in the process of creating a piece of art, they're really just, you can think about, I didn't talk about a sculpture, but a sculpture is the same way. What does somebody do when they create a sculpture? They're actually removing parts of the material that they're using. If somebody's making a sculpture out of marble, let's say, they're chipping away at things. They're creating space, and that space is what's going to create the art. Just like when a person is making music or visual art, like a drawing or whatever, they're really actually using those lines on the paper or using the notes in order to emphasize the spaces. So it's like a flip side of what you really want of the way we tend to think about art, is that it's really the spaces that give us that focus of what it is that we're supposed to be focusing on. And that ultimate focus, the ultimate purpose of it all, is that final product. It's what's left over after we removed all that space. Then yes, we enjoy the actual music, we enjoy the notes, we enjoy the lines on the paper, we enjoy that final sculpture, but it's all due to the removal of what we are not listening to. It's all due to the fact that the composer or the artist is saying, I'm not going to use this note, I'm not going to use that note, I'm not going to put a line here, I'm not going to use that color. And they make that final decision of which note they're going to use, which line they're going to use, which colors they're going to use. And that is the point of all of that removal, all of that restraint that they held themselves back of what they're not going to use, is for that final product. So too, all of these Tzimtzumim were all for the sake of us. We are the final product. We are that final piece of art. And so now the Alter Rebbe moves on to the more practical message for all of us, is that, again, he brings up this line, which he had mentioned previously, taken from Mishlei, which is Kemaim hapanim el lapanim, ken lev adam la'adam. So just like water reflects water, so does the heart of man reflect the heart of man. And we talked about this in terms of that whole episode where we talked about if somebody loves you and they show you love and they reveal love to you, then it's natural for you to feel love back at them and to project love back at them. So here, what is it that God is giving towards us? What is it that God's projecting us, that we're focusing on? Is him actually restraining himself. So just like the Alter Rebbe says that God, what does God do, so to speak, is that he takes his light by way of analogy and he sets it aside. He pushes it aside. This infinite light that God has, he sets aside the infinite light and he hides it and he conceals it in these three general Tzimtzumim, these general contractions that we've been talking about. And it's all for the sake of his love of man, of lowly man, in order to raise this man up to God, in order to bring us close to him. And then the Alter Rebbe brings a citation from the Gemara, from Bava Metzia, page 84a, where it says, Ahava docheket habasar, that love impels the flesh. So what that basically means is that on a simple level is that love can really motivate people to do a lot of things. And so in this sense that God basically through his love is impelling us, it's like drawing us to be able to come close to him. So it's like when we recognize this, like the point of this whole section is for us to really meditate upon this idea. And when we recognize how much, to what extent God put himself aside in order to create us, and that it's all for our sake and all for him calling us to come close to him, all the more so to a doubled and redoubled level, like to an infinite degree, really, should a person set themselves aside and really push aside anything that they have, really, whether it's a spiritual thing or whether it's a physical thing, and really renounce everything in order to cleave to God with a great cleaving and with a great longing and yearning. And there should be nothing that is holding us back, whether we're talking about physical things like relating to our bodies, or even spiritual things that are, more like spiritual, existential kind of in nature, not money related matters, and not even a wife and children, not even our family. So this is a really intense message. And this is actually where the Tanya ends today. And we're going to continue with this discussion tomorrow, because this is kind of like the Alter Rebbe is leaving us here with a little bit of a whoa, that he's basically saying that our devotion to God and our self-abnegation towards God should be so complete and so all-encompassing that it's not just like we're saying, don't do things that are outright evil or even against Torah, and as long as you're keeping, just like push yourself away from not breaking Shabbos or eating non-kosher food or something like that. The Alter Rebbe is taking it in a much bigger level here, going a lot deeper with this. We're saying, don't even let your family hold you back from serving God. Don't even let your own bodily needs hold you back from serving God. So what does this mean? This is a really big thing, and we're going to get into this a little bit more tomorrow. But just to kind of give you a little teaser in relation to that, it's the idea of self-abnegation is kind of like this very ironic thing, because truly, when we think about ourselves, when we think about how we define ourselves, and we tend to define ourselves in many different ways, as wife, as mother, as friend, as teacher, as, all these different definitions in relation to the people in our lives. All of these definitions are really very limiting, even if they have to do with our definitions of ourselves in relation to ourselves and in relation to our bodily needs, our existential thoughts, all of those things. They're all extremely limited, and while they're not false, they're only telling one part of the story. And truly, what the Alter Rebbe is trying to get us to do here is to revert back to our source. To just like with music, that the way that you get to the music is by removing the notes, by making space on the paper, by making space in the plaster for the sculpture that you're making or whatever it is. So too, in order to really bring out the essence of who we are, we need to make space. We need to actually detach ourselves from the things that we usually are attached to, even if these things are not necessarily negative things and seem at first glance to be the purpose of our entire life. The Alter Rebbe is saying, no, I want you to go deeper. These things are not the purpose of your life, and don't rely on them. Don't put your sustenance in them. Don't be codependent, in other words, upon any of these things. So we'll continue along these lines tomorrow, so stay tuned for that, and I will speak to you then. Thanks for listening to the It Is Taught podcast, hosted by Sarit Switzer. This podcast is dedicated in loving memory of my maternal grandfather, Avraham Yitzchak ben Binyamin HaKohen of blessed memory. Music by Shoshana. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the show, please share it with others and subscribe on YouTube, Apple iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And make sure to leave us a 5-star review. To find out more about the It Is Taught project, including more information on my soon-to-be published book, please visit our website, itistaught.com. To catch the latest from me, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Looking forward to speaking with you tomorrow, and until then, have a great day.